Hey, we are so glad you joined us. You know, on this program, 100 Huntley Street, we talk about a lot of different things. And today, Cheryl, we're going to be dealing with health. And you were getting ready for the program. I saw you in the green room. That's the place where we get ready and meet our guests and all that. And you had this green drink. It smelled like my wife's garden.
Well, the healthiest stuff does kind of smell like fresh cut grass. So Crystal Lavalley, who's been on this program many times, brought this from her mom to me. And so healthy, I feel great.
Yeah.
Strong.
And you only gave me this a little tiny bit, and I'm feeling pretty good. So I'm going to get the whole thing there. And you were telling me, though, that mint ice cream doesn't count as on the healthy
A green drink with mint ice cream. No, it wasn't mint ice cream.
Yeah. Hey, we've been talking about healing all this month, and I think it's really, I know for me, it's really increasing my faith.
Well, you know, I read a study recently in Baylor University that said 90% of Americans have prayed for healing. 90%.
Wow, 90.
And I wonder what that would be like if we translate it over here into Canada. There hasn't been a study that I know of here in Canada, but 90% had prayed for other people, 80% had prayed for themselves.
Wow.
And, you know, I was in the hospital this summer for surgery, and I cannot tell you how many people I prayed for.
Wow. Well, I do think when people are facing those kind of situations, they tend to be more, hey, why not give it a shot?
Absolutely.
Well, you know, today we're going to meet a pastor. He was a former science researcher, you know, and he went through his own journey of discovering God's healing powers. Coming up later.
As well, Robbie Simons is going to join us, and we're going to have the music of Wren Collective.
But first, the battle one man had raging inside, the Quran versus the Bible. Let's go to our studios in Calgary. Here's Rob Melnichuk.
Joining me in our Calgary studio is a former Muslim who, in his search for truth, almost ended up taking his own life until he met Jesus, and Jesus changed everything. Mustafa, welcome to 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Mustafa, you were born in Iraq, but you grew up in India. And for the first 14 years of your life, your family lived in poverty. Help us understand what it was like for the family to live in poverty.
Absolutely. So basically, because we're trying to live under the books, essentially, we try to make ends meet. You know, mom and dad are trying to make sure the kids had a decent future. There's food on the table, but that was very, very challenging. We're moving shelter to shelter, cash-paying jobs, so things were not looking very good for the future for the kids. But for the time being, it was a Band-Aid effect, essentially, from just escaping the war.
So living under the radar meant escaping the war. Like, was it difficult during that time?
Yeah, because we migrated to India unofficially, right? So we were just trying to take a bit of shelter until things have calmed down in Iraq, but we ended up getting stuck.
Okay. Now, your family were Muslim and followed the practices and teachings of Islam. How devout was your family?
Absolutely devout. I learned the Quran from watching my dad pray, from my mom praying. The siblings were all taught to read the Quran from as young as 3 years. The parents modeled Islam really, really well for us. So most of my upbringing was just Islam and my Arab culture. So I couldn't even distinguish one or the other. I just thought they were synonymous with each other.
Now here's what's interesting. You say that when you were 10 years of age, you had a nanny who was a Seventh-day Adventist. Did she ever try to sway you away from your Muslim faith?
Yeah, so as you know, my mom had cash-paying jobs, and there's 5 other siblings that I had, so it was really, really difficult to babysit them all. So she ended up hiring her to take care of us, and one of her conditions actually was to take the kids to church so that she's able to worship as she's babysitting. And my mom totally allowed that to happen, because thinking we're just kids, we wouldn't know, but that had a huge impact in my life, because I got to witness a lot of things, and I was actually the kid that collected the offerings at the church with the collection plate. Okay. So I thought that was really, really cool.
Now, interesting about being in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a Muslim, stories about Jesus. Remember those stories? Any impact of those stories later on in life?
I primarily remember the cross, seeing Christ on the cross, and just curious about that, because I've never seen symbolism in Islam. Islam is not a faith of depiction of character or anything like that, let alone a picture of God. So when I saw the statue of Christ on a cross, I was genuinely curious why anyone in their right mind would pray to a God that's getting killed, basically. So that was my biggest curiosity.
Okay. We'll talk about that in just a moment, which is also fascinating. But you at age of 14, your family then moves to Canada, and when you came through immigration, I understand that immigration said that Canada was a Christian nation. But you had a problem. You struggled with that fact that Canada's being Christian. How so?
Because out in the East, how we see the West is very, very different. So when we see, the celebrities, when we see the TV shows, and my mom sees a lot of the immorality in the Western culture, she associates that with Christianity. So to her, Christians meant drinking and partying and all those things. So obviously seeing that as the culture, we also adapted this preconceived notion that it's an immoral nation because it's Christian.
And then you mentioned just a few moments ago, you also struggled with this Christian faith when it had to deal with a man who died on a cross. Explain that a little more for us.
Yeah, because normally when I read the Quran, I read about a God who is unbelievably powerful. He's gracious and merciful, but at the same time, he's unbelievably just. He talks about how he's the master and we're the slaves. So I don't see a God dying. I don't see someone as strong as that dying. You look at the superheroes in comic books, they're always like buffed up with muscles and everything. I do not think a God, in Christianity would be depicted by a symbol of death. So that's why I was very, very fascinated by why anyone would pray to someone who's weak.
Now, your search then, as you grew older and finding Jesus, actually started in a Tim Hortons donut shop. Tell us that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at the university pursuing a degree, and no one at this point evangelized really that much. So when I saw this person standing right outside of Tim Hortons, he literally just asked me 2 questions. And I'm guessing it's an evangelist because it was very Jesus-driven. And he asked me what the Quran talked about salvation and if I knew personally who Jesus Christ was. And those are the 2 questions that he asked.
And when he asked you those questions, your response was?
I told him that I knew Jesus better than he did because I'm a Muslim, and the Quran has an accurate depiction of who Christ is because it was the final revelation given by God. So that's my response to him.
Okay, now did he try to challenge that at all?
No, he just asked me to look it up for myself.
You questioned the Muslim faith when you saw a friend's dead body. Why? Tell us that.
At first, my pursuit for God, or in this case in the Bible, I was more so of a curiosity. I didn't see my eternity on the line. When one of my best friends passed away and I saw his dead body in the casket, for the first time ever, the reality of death hit me. And I realized that, I was really living in a self-righteousness sort of idea where my works is going to get me to heaven. But then I started asking myself, what would make me go to this same heaven as an imam who does his 5 daily prayers, who's way more devout than I would be? And I called myself devout. So I was really, really challenged with the idea that maybe the Bible's onto something. Maybe I myself can't save myself. So now the challenge of knowledge turned into the challenge of where am I going to go? I had the Quran open on chapter 112. It talks about God being one, he was not begotten, doesn't have a son. And then I had the Bible open on John 3:16. So basically everything the reverse of the Quran.
Wherever you are across our great nation, when you need prayer, give us a call anytime. We're here for you.
Instead of maybe getting better, things kind of got more worse and challenging because you came to a point where you wanted to take your own life. How did that actually begin to happen?
So I basically hit a point where I did not know between the 2 books. I had the Quran open on chapter 112, and it talks about God being one, he was not begotten, doesn't have a son. And then I had the Bible open on John 3:16. So basically everything the reverse of the Quran. Had them both side by side, Rob, and I was like, okay, God, it's been 3 days, I couldn't even sleep properly. I was having a conversation with God just like how the Christians did, and I said, if you are truly who you say you are, come down and show me, or I'm gonna come up and ask you. Because in Psalm 139 verse 8, David says, where do I go from you that I may hide from your spirit? If I go to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you're there. So I thought to myself, even if I ended up in hell, even if I did that, at least I can have a conversation or some sort of an interaction with the Lord, asking him, because at that point, it didn't even matter where I was headed. I just wanted to know who he was, and it was driving me nuts.
So your hunger for God was at a point where God had, you show up, or I'm going to take my life and I'll meet you.
Exactly.
Now, how close did you get to taking your life?
So I ended up swallowing 22 sleeping pills, and I woke up in the psych ward. And that was a very different experience on its own. Because the Lord intervened many, many times in my life, you know, through the poverty and through the sicknesses that I've had. And this time he also intervened. And I didn't understand why, because he wouldn't answer me, but he's going to keep me on earth for more curiosity. So I didn't understand what was going on with the Lord. But thankfully he intervened, because looking back now, I was definitely not headed where I thought I was headed.
So out of that psych ward then, lead us up and tell us what happened. There was a day, August the 8th, 2015, that everything changed for Mustafa. Absolutely.
So in 2015, I was basically getting more and more Christian in my Muslim faith. So what that meant was my 5 daily prayers, I began understanding they were robotic. They were no longer coming from my heart, because there was only one person I was going to look at, and that person happens to be God that took a form of man. And then on August 8th, I had the Bible open on John 3:16, and I told myself, because my mind, historically I can prove Jesus, archaeologically I can prove Jesus, but my heart wasn't quite there. It was almost there. So I gave myself this challenge. I don't cry very much, Rob. So I said, I'm going to read John 3:16 as many times as it took until I started crying. Because that's when I knew now my mind and my heart are in tune. So I can start believing in the Lord. And it took me 2 hours reading the Bible, just John 3:16. That's all I read. And I started bawling my eyes out. And that's when I accepted Jesus into my heart.
You've said to me that after your conversion experience, you were angry because people didn't tell you about Jesus. Mustafa, if you can, you've got 30 to 45 seconds. You've got people's attention. They're watching. Can you tell them today, looking back and answering the question, why Jesus for Mustafa?
Absolutely. Because he's the only way. If Jesus is truth, then all the other ideas are a lie. And you don't want to buy into any other idea. And you can't make it yourself. That's why God shows you his love by sending you his son to die for you on the cross, so that you don't have to worry about being right enough. You're clothed in his righteousness, and you're made holy in you. And that's the God you want to follow, because he loves you. That's what I'd say.
Mustafa, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today on 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you for having me.
God bless you. Stay tuned. There's more to come.
I was blind, now I'm seeing in color. I was dead, now I'm living forever. I had failed, but you were my Redeemer. I've been blessed beyond all measure. I was lost, now I'm found by the Father. I've been changed from a ruin to treasure. I've been given a hope and a future. I've been blessed beyond all measure. I am counting every blessing, counting every blessing, letting go and trusting when I cannot see. I am counting every blessing, counting every blessing. Surely every season you are good to me. Oh, Surely every season you are good to me, good to me. I'm counting every blessing, I'm counting every blessing, letting go and trusting when I cannot see. Oh, I'm counting every blessing, I'm counting every blessing. Surely every season you are good to me. Oh, 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 you are good to me.
What a cool vibe from the Ren Collective.
love it.
And what a great message, counting every blessing. Okay, right now I just feel so moved
Yes.
that I think we need to have a Bible trivia moment.
Uh-oh.
With you
Pastor
as a
Greg.
contestant. Yeah, so in the interview that Rob Melnichuk did with Mustafa, he talked about John 3:16 was that verse that he kept reading that really was the root of his conversion.
Sure.
So Pastor Greg, what's John 3:16?
Well, let's see if I can do it without the King James Version, which is the one I memorized. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life.
Woo!
Did I
Good
get
job.
Did I get a star?
Yes, and how much courage did it take for
amazing.
Mustafa to convert to Christianity, knowing that that would be such an unpopular, sometimes in some countries of the world, that's a deadly decision that people can make.
And it was an amazing story, too. And, you know, one of the things I guess I asked the question, and I think we all need to ask that question. If you're watching, you don't know Jesus, who is Jesus? Who's he, you know, what is he all about? And that's where Mustafa asked that honest question, and then it took him on a search, and it led to him knowing Jesus as his friend.
What an incredible journey. Well, yesterday, we heard Carrie's incredible healing stories. We're going through these healing stories every day, going through infertility. Today, we're going to meet her husband, Tommy, a former science researcher who went through his own journey of discovering God's healing power. Here's an excerpt of his story.
I have always believed that God can do supernatural stuff. I was a science student, scientist, working as a researcher for a little bit, and but I actually never really find contradiction between these two, because science, by definition, we are talking about studying of the natural world. But God is outside science. God is above science. God created science, created the world, created all the natural law. So I think it would be very easy for him to just, you know, twist something and go against the natural law once in a while, whenever he wants, and as he deems fit. But to expect it actually happens to us, that's another story. Lisa was diagnosed with terminal ovary cancer. So when she was, when she saw the doctor found tumors all over her body. And she was a single mom. Her daughter is only, 5-year-old at that time. The doctor also found something amazing. The tumor that they removed from her body, when they were doing some tests, some observation, they found that the tumors were all dead cells. They were not living cancer cells. So the doctor said, I've never seen anything like that. So, and we in the church are like praising God. It's like, oh God, you are so real. And we never knew what to expect. One very important thing is that I would always encourage the person to always seek the healer, but not so much the healing. Of course, we know healing is important, but at the end of the day, if Jesus is healer, the healer that is even more important. Go for the healer. Go for God.
Such wise words from Tommy. Seek the healer, not just the healing. Or some people would say, seek his face, not his hand. So in other words, not what he can do for you, but who he is. And it's all kind of tied together.
It is, you know, and one of the things I really appreciate, and we're going to talk about Lorna's book here in a moment, is there's so many different ways that God heals. Sometimes it's the miraculous, and we love to tell those stories, and we'll continue to tell those stories, but then sometimes it's a slower process, and also like what Tommy said too, and very important, that there's no contradiction between faith and science. You say, you know, I'm into science, that faith stuff's over here, or I'm into faith and that science thing, that's against God. Well, that's not true, and you know, people like Tommy that are, you know, seeking and trying to understand, say, hey, there is no contradiction.
Yeah, and if you want prayer to seek the healer, or if you need prayer for healing, we would love to pray with you. Give our prayer lines a call. You can do that any time of the day or night, 1-866-273-4444. And as well, another great resource is Lorna's book. You mentioned that, For Your Health. This contains all kinds of stories of people who have been through a healing journey and how they were healed, whether through a doctor's or prayer. If you want to get a hold of that, here's how you can get your copy.
Leaving the hospital that day, I had to phone our kids. And say, I've got some bad news.
There is one thing that has always helped people overcome unbearable circumstances: prayer. With thousands of people reaching into our prayer lines for help and for healing, we can rely on one truth: Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever.
So the question Dr. Nell DeBoer and I set out to answer in our book, For Your Health, is how can we access God's methods for healing? Our book shines a light on biblical context of God healing humanity while also giving you scientific proof for miraculous healing. We give you awe-inspiring case studies of individuals who have defied medical odds through Jesus' power to heal us. And when we put the mystery of God, obedience to prayer, and broken health into spiritual practice, even our biggest weakness can become our greatest strength. So I pray this book will fortify you in faith. It'll inspire you to pray, to put your trust in God, and it will be healing to you, allowing God to comfort, encourage, and affect you for your health.
Call 1-800-265-3100 or donate online at crossroads.ca/donate.
Get inspired with daily Advent devotionals on hope, peace, joy, and love. Go to crossroads.ca/Advent right now and sign up for your free daily Advent emails.
Hey, do you find yourself in the midst of a crisis? If so, I don't want to say good, but at the same time, I want to say you're at the right place. I mean, this is life, isn't it? Life is filled with the ups and downs. Life is filled with different times of good, but also crises are guaranteed. This week, such an important week, we are learning what is the key to have courage within crisis. When crisis hits, how do we not capitulate or fall apart? How do we find courage in the things of the Lord? We are walking through 2 Chronicles chapter 20, an incredible story, a true story, dealing with Jehoshaphat and the people of God as they were opposed by the enemies of God coming against them with this massive army. Jehoshaphat's leadership is tremendous, and he gives us an outline of what we can do also when we are faced with crisis. So far this week, we have learned when crisis comes upon us, we must start by seeking the Lord. There's no more important path than to seek the Lord on our face, as Jehoshaphat led so beautifully and gathered all of God's people to do the same. Here's the second step we see today in the midst of crisis. You want courage? It comes through power found through prayer. No power is found like the power of praying and dependence to our God. Again, notice in 2 Chronicles 20, when Jehoshaphat falls on his face, he begins to immediately pray in dependence, because that's what prayer is. God, we can't do it, you must. He begins with a prayer and it says, are you not the God of heaven? Are you not the one who made everything? Are you not the one who's in control? Then we find in verses 7 to 9, Jehoshaphat recalls the faithfulness of God. That is so powerful. Jehoshaphat basically prays and says, God, you've done it before, you're going to do it again. God, you are all powerful then, you will be powerful now. And verses 10 and 11, he explains, Lord, we even spared the enemies coming against us, but now they want to kill us. How's that for treatment? But then we come to a verse that's one of my favorite verses in the Old Testament, 2 Chronicles 20, verse 12. Listen to what it says. It says this, O our God, will you not execute judgment on them? Here it is right here. For we are powerless against this great horde that is coming against us. Ready? We don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Don't you love the transparency of Jehoshaphat there? He essentially says, God, we don't know what to do except to put our eyes on you. You know, this verse became a theme verse in our church very early on, the church that I pastor. In fact, it was so impactful that the leaders and the elders of our church, we said, that is our theme, to the point that we had t-shirts made, okay? So we cared about this so much. This is what we had printed up. We had the verse, chapter 20, again, verse 12, right there. And it says, Lord, we don't know what to do. We don't know what we're doing became our motto. And then right here it says, the verse below it, because this is how important it was to us. Isn't that exciting and isn't that fun? The thrill of being together and saying, God, end of the day, we don't know. We can't do this, but you can and you will. So Father, start with us in a place of dependence. We don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. The power of prayer in the midst of a crisis. Where else are we going to go? Ourselves? The world? Society? That won't work. The Lord works every single time. Hey, this moment is for you right now. There's no question. You are watching, you are listening to this because God is speaking to you in the midst of crisis that are upon us or they're coming soon. Prayer lines, 1-866-273-4444. Reach out to someone in prayer and be prayed for and be blessed this week as we find courage within crisis.
Hey, thanks, Robbie. Good advice. Hey, something that's coming up on Friday night, Houses of Refuge Gala Dinner, and it's taking place in Kitchener, and they're going to have some amazing speakers there, including...
Aw, thanks, Greg. Well, this is a ministry that we partner with. You've probably seen it on this program with Crossroads Relief and Development is the way that we fight trafficking here in Canada. If you want to come out, the information is on your screen.
And you get to meet Cheryl Weber in person. Hey, if you go to 100huntley.com, we want to get you the Reach magazine. It comes out every couple of months, and it's a great magazine. Find out what's happening. And because we're getting close to Christmas, because it's beginning to feel a lot like Christmas,
stress.
we have the Advent devotional. You and I and our team here are featured in it, so go to 100huntley.com.
We love to resource you with all kinds of things like that. This is just one of many things that you can do to grow in your faith spiritually. And thank you so much for joining us today. No stress for Christmas.
No stress. Oh, just thinking about it.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a member of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2.
Cheryl Weber's wardrobe provided by Melanie Lynn.